Hello and welcome into another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. 5 Rounds is served by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. The seafood is so fresh at the Quarterdeck. The burgers, the sandwiches, and the ribs are to die for, my friends. It is the best place to watch every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge. Visit them on the web and peep their menu at quarterdeckrestaurants.com. Locations all over South Florida. Find the one nearest to you. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. So on this episode of 5 Rounds, we'll get into some questionable decisions on the judges' scorecards this past weekend. And we'll look ahead to a weekend where I strongly feel that the UFC will not be the best MMA show this coming weekend. I am Alex Donno, alongside, as always, the man who you need to follow on Twitter and follow quickly because we want to pump up that follower count. He's at Real Frank Z. He's Frank Zaffere. Frank, how are you, sir?
I'm great. I'm up to, let me check, 34 followers.
Boom.
Which sounds like not many, and that's true, but it's twice as many as last week. So, it's 100% increase.
It's big, 100% increase. And James Walker is back with us, and we're so happy to have this man back. How are you, James?
I'm great. Sorry I missed you last week, but I'm locked and loaded and got a lot of stuff to talk about this week, so let's do it.
Awesome. And by the way, I hope that everyone who's on with us live here on YouTube, take advantage of the live chat feature. We'll answer some of the questions live. We'll flash up some of the best comments that come your way. That discretion is really, though, up to Manny Chang. It doesn't matter if I like your comment or not. If Manny likes your comment, he will flash it on the screen. And while you're in there watching us live on YouTube, make sure to smash that like button, the thumbs up, and tell your friends that we have combat sports content coming at you from every angle here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. In fact, a little bit later on, we'll talk to one of the men who provides so much content here on 5 Reasons. Jonathan Ramlakhan, Three-Piece MMA, is going to join us. Three-Piece Combo will be with us at 7 o'clock tonight. At 6:30, we're going to talk to a legendary member of the South Florida media. I've known this guy forever. Now, he has been covering professional wrestling since prehistoric times. I don't want to age the guy too much, but he also covers mixed martial arts. Jim Varsallone from the Miami Herald is going to join us today at 6:30. But we have a lot to dive into, guys. So we are a couple days removed from what was truly an excellent UFC Fight Night card in Las Vegas. And I don't want to tear down this card just because I had problems with a few of the judges' decisions, because regardless of a few folks getting robbed of their win bonuses, right? Top to bottom, honestly, that card featuring the likes of TJ Dillashaw against Cory Sandhagen in a Bantamweight title eliminator, an excellent co-main event with Kyler Phillips, who is all action, taking on Raulian Pavia, the awesome Darren Elkins against Derek Minner, Macy Barber, Miranda Maverick, Randy Costa, Adrian Yanez. Like, honestly, guys, this was a somewhat pay-per-view caliber event that just couldn't be a pay-per-view because you didn't have the main event draw of a title fight or a Conor McGregor. So it had to be a fight night card.
Not pay-per-view worthy. Get out of here with that.
Dude, you watched the card, though.
But the main event was headlined by a guy that we didn't know what to expect from because he just came back from an EPO suspension. And the rest, and at least 6 fighters on the card don't have Wikipedia pages. So don't be throwing that pay-per-view worthy crap out there.
By the way, I always love the metric of whether a fighter has a Wikipedia page or not, of measuring that fighter's value. And honestly, for people like us who, talk about these fights on YouTube and on the radio and on podcasts, it is really goddamn annoying when you're looking through a fight card and you try to click on someone's Wikipedia page and they just don't have one. Like, it is very, very aggravating, whether you're a fight fan or a fight content creator. It's really annoying when a fighter doesn't have a wiki page.
And it ruins my show prep. I can tell you that. I mean, that's my one-stop go-to place. I mean, they don't have a Wikipedia page, I'm not covering them.
I mean, James, am I wrong here, though, to say that, and my point was, and I feel like Frank may have either just coughed all over my point and urinated all over it, that when you just go by the actual quality of the fights, they delivered a pay-per-view caliber card, but it couldn't be a pay-per-view because you didn't have a strap or a Conor McGregor in the main event.
I think the first point you said was well said. Just take out the title part and the Conor McGregor part, but it was a technical fans card. if you like technical fights, if you like strategic fights, especially in the main event, it was your kind of card. It wasn't a, bang 'em, knockout, 30-second kind of card. But if you like strategy, if you like technical fights, if you like those kind of good matchups, the UFC did a good job, especially for a fight night card, of picking these matchups, and the fighters performed. It was a real good technical fight. I want to get right to the main event because I know we disagree on the results. So speaking of it.
Alex, he's right. It was, you know what it was? It was a card for the diehards, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't the casual fan card, but for people like us, and the reason you're so effusive with your praise of it, Alex, is because it had all the elements that people that are really into the sport would enjoy. And as James referenced, the strategy and all of the stuff that was going into these fights, and bad decisions notwithstanding, it was technical. It was interesting to the diehards. That's it. And that you can't put that on a pay-per-view.
And now, and I thought one of those bad decisions you speak of, and this was not the worst decision on the card, but one of those bad decisions I thought was in the main event that saw TJ Dillashaw get his hand raised in a Bantamweight title eliminator fight against Cory Sandhagen. It was by split decision. So one of the judges saw it my way. Two of the judges saw it the other way. Now, before I get into why I think it was the wrong decision, I've got to say I came out of this fight really impressed with both guys. Like, this is one of those rare instances, and in most cases, I know draws do happen, but in most cases, someone's got to win and someone's got to lose. But what makes a truly excellent fight to me is when both fighters come out of, especially a main event, with me feeling like they both raised their stock. Now, why did Cory Sandhagen raise his stock? This is the toughest opponent, arguably, he's ever faced. I say arguably because Aljamain Sterling can be in that conversation as well. But this was a huge, huge fight for Cory Sandhagen. He got tested over 5 rounds, went the quote-unquote championship rounds for the first time in his career. And I thought he actually had a lot of answers for the questions that TJ Dillashaw was asking him. And he got stronger as the fight went on. So I couldn't come away with that not being impressed by Cory Sandhagen. Meanwhile, TJ Dillashaw, you could argue he had a lot to prove coming from, 2 years away and an EPO suspension. But at the same time, when it comes to championship rounds and 5-round fights, we've seen TJ in many of those in his career. So I had less of a doubt that TJ could have a strong 5 rounds. But what impressed me so much, guys, about TJ Dillashaw's performance was I thought from the aspect of the chess match part of a fight, how to score points, how to strategize, I thought TJ did really well. I also thought that he looked pretty good despite being off for 2.5 years. Maybe there was a little bit of ring rust there, but not a whole lot of ring rust there. And I thought he dealt overall pretty well with the very dangerous striking of Cory Sandhagen, who makes a habit of putting people away early. I mean, Cory Sandhagen's previous 2 fights, he basically committed 2 murders, like with the way that he was able to just knock Hanan Barao unconscious and knock Frankie Edgar unconscious, and TJ walked through a lot of those shots. But what impressed me the most, guys, about TJ Dillashaw was a lot of adversity. I mean, not only 2.5 years away, which can create rust in some fighters, but at the end of the first round, he popped something in his knee. It was an LCL and meniscus issue, which he did just have surgery on, but he popped something in his knee after the first round. He suffers a gigantic gash above his eye in the second round. And after both of those injuries took place, I'm thinking, how the hell is TJ going to stay strong for 5 full rounds with this adversity? He was able to answer those questions. So if I'm looking at this from a standpoint of how do I score the fight, it was close, right? I'm not saying it was highway robbery. It was very close. If you look at it from the gamesmanship, chess match aspect of it, TJ Dillashaw fought very smart. He was scoring points. He was really controlling the fight with the way he was able to clinch and press Sandhagen up against the fence. But the reason why I thought Cory Sandhagen won that fight was, first and foremost, guys, he did a lot more damage. So it's like, what's your philosophy on scoring a fight? One of the ways to look at it is, if there was no octagon, if these guys were out in the wild, so to speak, and one guy was going to put the other guy away, that was going to be Sandhagen. Like, TJ Dillashaw was not putting Cory Sandhagen away on that night. If you had just kept fighting round after round after round until somebody got finished, it would have been TJ Dillashaw, okay? So I thought the damage that Cory Sandhagen did to me was the deciding factor if I were scoring that fight. Now, obviously, we go round by round on this, so I can't just come out of 5 rounds and say, well, who do I think's face looks better and who did more damage? I thought that TJ, I thought, took the first round. I thought Cory Sandhagen clearly took round number 2. Then I thought TJ came back strong from some round 2 adversity and won the 3rd round. The 4th round was the closest. And I think the scoring really came down to who did the judges think won round 4. I thought Cory Sandhagen edged it out, and I thought Cory Sandhagen clearly won the 5th round, all of these being 10-9. So on my scorecard, no 10-8s in the fight. I thought that it should have been 48-47 Cory Sandhagen. I thought they got it wrong. Before I get to Frank's take, and I'll go to James first because I think Frank agrees with me, James does not. How did you see it?
Alex, we agree on a lot more than I thought. The only thing we disagree on is the result. In the fourth round, I had TJ edging out Sandhagen in that 4th round, and I think that's the difference in our cards. I had 48-47. Did I get that right? 48-47 for Dillashaw. Everything you mentioned was on point. Dillashaw won the 1st. Dillashaw won the 3rd. I don't think there's any debate about that. Sandhagen won the 2nd. Sandhagen won the 5th. It's that 4th round that was close. I had TJ edging it out. And on top of that, the things that you had mentioned, just the toughness that he showed. He was always pressing forward, even when he was hurt, even when he had the cut, even when he popped his knee. He was pressing the fight. He had the takedowns. He didn't do much damage in the takedowns, but there were a lot of takedowns. I lost count. It was probably 6 or 7 takedowns in the entire fight. That's a lot of takedowns, even if you aren't holding Sandhagen down for 3 minutes and ground and pounding him on any of those takedowns. You do have that cumulative effect. And as you mentioned, you have to score each round as its own round. You can't say, okay, well, TJ's cut. TJ, he popped his knee in the 1st round. He got hit with a spinning back fist, a couple flying knees. There were more significant damage done to TJ Dillashaw. But if you score each round individually, I had TJ winning the fight. Now, if they had scored it 48-47 the other way, I wouldn't have been screaming highway robbery or anything like that. I wouldn't be complaining. So I think for you two, they scored it 48-47. At least 2 judges in favor of Dillashaw. I don't think you guys should be screaming either. I think it was just one of those close fights that was up to the judges and they favored TJ. But it was a very close fight, 1 point, 1 round either way, and that's what it was in my book.
Can I reference boxing for a minute? I know James is a boxing guy, right? So in boxing there was this adage: you have to beat the champ, right? And that was one of the things that made the Hagler-Leonard fight, 30 plus years, I still haven't gotten over it, right? You have to beat the champ. But if neither guy's the champion, then it's a technical scoring event. Right. It felt to me post-fight like the judges were treating TJ as if he was the champ. It felt that way to me because Sandhagen did everything technically he needed to do to win the fight. He caused more damage and, in my opinion, scored more effectively and did better in the later rounds when you're really turning the screws, when it's really coming push to shove, a la Kamaru Usman. I know we're going to talk about him later, but it's something, a hallmark of him so far in his career. When the 5th round, that's when he really comes after it. Sandhagen had his best round in the 5th round. And I know each round is scored individually, but for me, it was not close in terms of obviously it was a close fight, but for me, there was no doubt. And it felt like the judges were treating TJ as the champ. And there was more lost here for Sandhagen than just a fight win bonus. I mean, he lost the shot at the title. Yeah. I mean, this is really upsetting. And, look, TJ's a big name, so he's going to go on and challenge for the title. They're not going to redo this one. But, for Sandhagen now, it looks like he's faced 2 really good guys. The 2 best guys he's faced, he's lost to both of them. So it's amazing what the consequences of what I think are bad judging do to this man's career. He beats TJ, and Aljamain Sterling is forgotten, and maybe he's fighting for the title. And now it looks like he's just not ready for the top tier, and it's unbelievable, the consequences.
And by the way, you got to feel a little bit bad for Sandhagen because he would have already gotten a title shot if not for the fact that the ending of the first fight between Sterling and Petr Yan was so controversial. I mean, Sterling wins the fight by disqualification, and so they got to run that one back, right? And so in running that one back, that means Sandhagen has to either wait or stay active. I respect the fact that he chose to stay active because he probably didn't have to do that, but he wanted to keep fighting. The TJ Dillashaw fight was a big one for him, a big fight for both guys. And I thought he should have gotten the nod. But on that note, because Frank, and we can all three of us agree, no matter how we scored it, we can agree it was a super close fight. Do either of you, and Frank, I'll start with you, do either of you think that there should be an immediate rematch for this one? Because I don't, but I'm also very biased against immediate rematches. I think it just keeps an entire division stuck in quicksand. This wasn't enough of a robbery for me that you run it back immediately. Like it sucks for Sandhagen. But I think the right thing to do is keep things moving forward. And I do believe that these guys have not fought for the last time. I think that at some point they will meet again because I think TJ might win the title and then Sandhagen is going to, stay near the top in terms of contendership. So I think that they will fight again. I'm not anxious to run it back immediately. What do you think, Frank?
Well, this goes back to your opening monologue comment about this, in your opinion, being pay-per-view worthy. Everyone needs to remember this is the entertainment business. Nobody wants to see this run back. The casual fan doesn't want to see it run back, so it won't be. I mean, that's the answer. If these were bigger names, if this was, McGregor and somebody, then yeah, you'd run it back and you'd run it back fast. But in this instance, no, of course not. You're not going to run it back. You're not going to hold up the division. And in fact, the UFC is probably adamant and excited about doing just the opposite because TJ in that division is the most marketable name. If they can get the belt back around his waist, then they may have pay-per-view worthy cards with a title fight in that division headlining that they really don't have right now in his absence.
Yeah, Frank, and that's a good point. And I don't know if Cory Sandhagen has fallen that far down with this close loss. I think just playing matchmaker, I think you could put him in with Rob Font at the end of the year.
Yep.
I also think you could put him against the loser of Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling, or maybe early next year. I think he has some options to where he could stay right in that title conversation to where obviously he's not going to get the next title shot. TJ Dillashaw is going to get the first crack at that. But look, if he fights a Rob Font and stays right in that conversation, he could be, the next guy, say, summer of 22. Or maybe late 22. So I don't think this drops him so far down to where he needs to win like 2 or 3 fights.
So, I would describe the main event result as questionable judging, but earlier in the card, we had bad judging. And one of these I thought was highway robbery. I mean, I thought that the decision victory for Raulian Paiva against Kyler Phillips was completely wrong. Now, I thought the fight should have been a draw. Now, I know nobody likes draws, right? It's the least decisive result, but it was academic to me because Kyler Phillips was butchering Raulian Paiva in the first round. That was a 10-8 round, maybe even a 10-7, because he was inches away from a TKO victory in the final seconds of the first round. And the beating that he put on Paiva in the first round was so bad, I really thought Paiva wouldn't be able to continue. Like, he is a tough mother, for continuing in that fight, because I thought he was just his corner would say, guys, we're done. We can't continue this fight, because he was getting absolutely butchered by Kyler Phillips. And then a lot of heart and a lot of cardio, where Paiva goes on to win the second round, clear 10-9, third round, clear 10-9. So if you have an obvious 10-8 first round and then 2 10-9s, the fight's a 28-28 draw. I don't see how it's that complicated. But then somehow these judges, who on some nights are throwing around 10-8 rounds like candy, and then on other nights they refuse to score any 10-8 rounds when they should be there. Like, I'll give you this example, guys. The beating that Phillips put on Paiva in the first round was in no way equal to the beatings that Paiva put on Phillips in the second and third round. So how do you score all 3 of those rounds the same score? Like, they're not all 10-9s. One of those is a 10-8. So that should have been a clear draw. They award the decision somehow to Raulian Paiva. And then earlier in the card, in the women's bantamweight division, the Macy Barber quote-unquote victory over Miranda Maverick was absolutely absurd. Now, I get one thing, going back to something Frank mentioned, there's no question Macy Barber was the stronger fighter at the end of the bout. She won the third round clearly, but the first 2 rounds, and these were all 10-9s. There were no 10-8s in this fight. The first 2 rounds were so clear Miranda Maverick rounds. Macy Barber was doing nothing. Like, Macy Barber barely threw a goddamn punch until the third round of the fight. She was getting picked apart from Miranda Maverick's range. The second round was a little bit closer than the first, but I thought Maverick did clearly more damage, and then she sealed that second round with a takedown, had her background and pound. It was a very clear Miranda Maverick round. So 10-9 Maverick first round, 10-9 Maverick second round, clear third round, 10-9 Macy Barber, yet somehow 2 of the judges saw the second round for Macy Barber. So we had some truly awful decisions in this fight card. Like, guys, maybe if we knew this answer, we'd be, making millions of dollars traveling around the world fixing MMA and boxing scoring. But is there a way we can fix this, guys? Because it's not always bad judging. It's also inconsistent judging. How can we make this better? Because a couple of thoughts that I have, Frank, is like, we need to find a way to make it more punitive when judges clearly do a bad job, because it seems like there's no consequence for it whatsoever. It's like, oh yeah, this judge had terrible scorecards, but yeah, you want to work again next week? Sure. Like, there doesn't seem to be any consequence whatsoever for doing a terrible job. I would also like to see more high-level professional fighters, retired fighters, become judges, because it seems like we get a lot of these same eggheads who probably never fought in their life, or maybe they're people who judge boxing and just automatically get put judging MMA fights for no real reason whatsoever. I'm sure the training needs to be better, but I get it that a lot of these athletic commissions run on a shoestring budget, and they're probably not wanting to foot the bill for like training retreats and stuff. So Frank, how do we fix this? Because judging is not getting better.
Well, you just touched on it. I mean, look, James knows all about the NFL. The problem with the UFC compared to the NFL is the UFC doesn't get to control important aspects of what's happening. They don't get to control who refs the thing. They don't get to control who judges it. They don't get to control a lot of really important elements. If you're watching a Patriots-Dolphins game and there's like a whole bunch of just horrible calls in the game, the NFL is going to take action against that referee. I mean, it's going to happen. He's going to have to answer, or he or she's going to have to answer for their poor work performance. In the UFC, it doesn't exist. They need to separate themselves somehow. And I don't know how they are able to go about this, but because, fighting in general kind of falls under the boxing paradigm of the control of individual state athletic commissions, that needs to be changed. Look, they got it legalized. So I got to believe that they can take the next step and find a way to actually create a league where they're deciding those important elements. And then, yes, then you have retreats, you have training sessions. They can't stop putting fighters on the desk for broadcasting. Some of these guys are no good. Send them down to the judging booth because, they're going to do much better there than they are trying to interview other fighters. So, yeah, then they would have the kind of control that they need to fix this. But in the absence of that, there is no remedy because, as you point out, a lot of these state athletic commissions don't have big budgets, and the budgets they have, they're certainly not going to devote to training, for UFC or mixed martial arts, educational courses.
Yeah, I love that idea, Frank, but I think it's a little bit of fantasy in terms of, at least in the United States. I think what the UFC could do and could try is maybe on an international level, like if you're in Abu Dhabi, if you're in Brazil, if you're in London, some of Australia, some of these, foreign countries, maybe they can try to set up their own judging system that way and then have enough influence to bring it to the United States. But I think the athletic commissions in the U.S. are too powerful right now to kind of be separated from the sport. So I think they're just kind of tied up in that. Actually spoke to Rory McDonald about this last week because he was also the victim of poor judging in his last fight against Gleison Tibau. And he said, to your point, Alex, that there needs to be accountability. And he said if you set up a sort of a not a union, but something above the judging, the judging paradigm to where they're holding these judges accountable and they're grading them and they're going back and rewatching the fights and things like that to where you can kind of establish who are good judges and who are bad judges and putting those judges on the most important fights. But right now, as you said, it's just willy nilly, they're just making calls and judging fights, and there's no accountability to it, so they get to judge the next fight. So it's really a bad setup. But good point. I like your point, Frank. I just think maybe they should try more at international level first.
James, I love that. That's the way to pressure the states, right? Take the income out of where it is and take it over there. Go back to Fight Island and stuff like that, and sell the T-Mobile event center in Las Vegas to the Indians.
So, guys, I want to circle back to TJ Dillashaw, as now he did have surgery on his knee, and I know when people hear knee surgery, it sounds terrible. I think in his case, it's only going to be about a 6-week recovery. That doesn't mean he necessarily jumps right back into fight camp after 6 weeks, but I think the timing can work out, right? Because the Aljamain Sterling Petr Yan rematch is in late October, and I think by the time that fight is over, TJ should be more than a full go in training and able to put in a camp probably around 6 months later to fight the winner of that. So I don't think that the injury that he suffered, which was an LCL and a meniscus, that's not going to jeopardize him getting a title shot in his next fight. So now personally, I don't know if you guys agree or disagree. I do see Petr Yan winning the rematch and getting his belt back. He was winning that fight, before the very unfortunate, idiotic decision he made to throw that illegal knee, because Petr Yan, the guy is a freaking machine, right? I mean, sometimes he leaves his brain back in the locker room, apparently, but the third lung that he has, the cardio is absurd. The strength that he has at that weight class is crazy, and how he gets stronger as fights go on. The guy is freaking impossible to take down. And you could see him wearing down Aljamain Sterling before he threw the illegal knee. So he would have won that fight if not for the stupid decision he made to get disqualified. So I see Petr Yan winning. But regardless of who wins the rematch, guys, do you see TJ Dillashaw beating either of them in a title fight? Because the weird thing about the styles make fights. Even though I think Petr Yan is a better fighter than Aljamain Sterling, and he's going to prove that in the rematch, I'm kind of wondering if Aljamain Sterling wouldn't be the tougher matchup for TJ Dillashaw, because Sterling moves a lot more, and I think he can kind of mirror the way the TJ fights, whereas Petr Yan is more of a stationary target. So maybe TJ can get on his bicycle and pick him apart a little bit. And Sterling also has that length and that incredible jab. So I think it would be harder for TJ to pick him apart with his striking. So, I mean, I don't think either guy would be a walk in the park for TJ, but I think that Petr Yan might actually, in a weird way, be the easier matchup for him. But yeah, man, it's tough. Do you think, Frank, that TJ is going to get his belt back in about 8 months' time?
No, he's got no shot against Yan. I mean, none.
Wow.
I mean, just the aggression, the viciousness, the skill, the strength. That guy is the next evolution in the division. I would bet the farm on him in that fight. Aljamain Sterling, I don't know. I mean, I love Aljamain, nicest guy in the world. If you ever met him, I mean, literally maybe one of the top 5 nicest guys in the sport. But I think TJ could beat Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say TJ has no shot against Yan. I think he does have a decent shot because TJ fights well against those tough strikers. Kind of reminds me of the Renan Barão matchup when people thought no one could beat Renan Barão. Yan,
that was me.
Yeah. I remember that he had that aura around him. Yan is kind of developing that aura around him right now. But TJ, I think, matches up pretty well against him. So I agree with you with that. With that assessment. Sterling, I mean, he had a good first round, but then started to fade. Something I give Yan a lot of credit for, and this is kind of the mark to me of a good champion. When you fight as strong as you can in the 4th and 5th round as you do in the first round, then you're legit. That's kind of what we're seeing with Kamaru Usman. That's what we're seeing with a lot of the champions, style bender out there, and Petr Yan as well. They fight just as hard and just as strong in the 4th and 5th rounds as they fight in the first round. I think that's really the mark of a champion. Petr Yan has that.
Let's go out to bring in our first special guest of this episode. This man is legendary, covering professional wrestling, and he does cover mixed martial arts as well for the Miami Herald. I've had the privilege of knowing this man for years. The great Jim Varsallone joins us here on 5 Rounds on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Jim, how you doing, sir? Oh, are you rocking the PFL cap? I love it.
Yes, we're doing Professional Fighters League, the home, South Florida, in all of August. They're taking over Hard Rock, Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in August. We're going strong with PFL.
And by the way, Jim, it was so nice seeing you last week. I couldn't make the Thursday session at Sanford MMA, but I was at the Wednesday session at American Top Team, and dude, that was a freaking experience. That was so nice seeing you out there and covering the great fighters like the Kayla Harrisons and the Haush Manfios and the Shoe Faces who were out there. That was so cool.
It was really good. They were at Sanford MMA. I was planning to go the next day, and then as things happened, things changed. A lot of stuff going on that next day, and I wasn't able to make it over to Sanford MMA. I really wanted to talk to Rory McDonald. I did speak to him before his first fight with PFL, but I really was looking forward to speaking to him again. But hopefully between now and August 13th, I'll be able to chat with him either at Sanford MMA or maybe at the weigh-ins with PFL.
Now, Jim, something I wanted to ask you, because you are my go-to guy when it comes to professional wrestling. And obviously, mixed martial arts does have some pro wrestling DNA. I mean, I can remember in the 90s when you had the crossover guys like Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn were appearing in the WWE. But your take, Jim, covering both sports, do you feel like a lot of these mixed martial arts fighters are now kind of following the pro wrestling model on cutting promos and promoting themselves? And do you ever think it goes a little bit too far? Because to me, sometimes with the way these fighters try to promote themselves, I think it goes a little too pro wrestling and a little over the top.
I think it has more to do with what Conor McGregor has been able to do. And whether he did that from pro wrestling or not, or that's just Conor McGregor, however you want to look at it, I don't know the answer to that. But I really think it goes to look at how he is obviously during his prime, and he's still going, I know, but he was just unstoppable. And when you have that along with the ability to talk like he does, when you think about pro wrestling, one of its biggest eras was the Attitude Era. And that era was when the pro wrestlers really did a lot of trash talking. No holds barred type trash talking. And that was a very profitable and a big time for professional wrestling. I think what we're seeing is Conor McGregor has taken to that Attitude Era style. Other MMA fighters have seen that and said, look what this guy's been able to do with it. Hey, if we're a good fighter, maybe we could do that. And some of them have taken to go that route. Professional wrestling has been around a long time. We've always had that trash talk, and that's always been the big sell for pro wrestling, even more so than the matches themselves. MMA, it's a little different. MMA, still the big sell is the actual competition because it is an actual competition. But if you can talk too, fans like that. They like the trash talk. Whether you're an MMA fan or a pro wrestling fan, there are a lot of fans that do like that. Hey, you're going to get your purists that are going to say, too much trash talk and I'm not into it and all like that. But you know what? A lot of times they're still going to watch the fight.
Jim, you can't have too much trash talking, but I have to ask you, I think about Brock Lesnar and the impact he had on mixed martial arts, and now Ronda Rousey over on the other side doing what she's doing. Who's the next big star in wrestling that's going to come make a gigantic splash in the UFC? Who's that person going to be?
Now, that's interesting. It's so hard for an actual pro wrestler. Brock Lesnar had that background. He had the wrestling, the amateur wrestling background, NCAA champion. Him going into the MMA world, it wasn't out of the question. Now, winning a UFC title, maybe, but doing well, it wasn't out of the question because of his background. Right. Bobby Lashley has the background. He was able to do well with Bellator. They had the background. That was the thing. You look at CM Punk, who was a professional wrestler. He tried to do MMA. He gave it a good effort, but it just wasn't there for him. It's harder to transition when you don't have that background, some type of background, amateur wrestling. I look at someone, there's a young man in the Olympics. His name is Gable Steveson. Not Stevenson, but Steveson. So many people make that mistake. It's easy. I made the mistake at first to say Stevenson. But anyway, he made the U.S. Olympic team. He will be wrestling in the Olympics now, and he's a huge WWE fan. Him and his brother, also a good amateur wrestler, have already been to WWE up in Orlando at the Performance Center. Basically, it's just whenever you're ready, come aboard. think someone like that, he's at the NCAA championships. Gable won the heavyweight division. He ends up doing a heavyweight, doing a backflip after he wins. Then he's waving to Vince McMahon on Twitter, and so he's really good. He's really into it. I don't know all of his trash talking skills, but as far as just his abilities and his passion, it's there. And his brother is also very good at it. I could see that crossover being something where maybe Gable tries both. But the thing is, I'll tell you what, Frank, when you sign with WWE, it is a full-time commitment because they're traveling. Now with COVID, we're getting over that. The travel is so much every week, whether it's a TV show or a house show, they call it, no TV. They're grinding every week. So it's hard to do both when you're part of WWE. Now, there are a lot of other pro wrestling companies that are out there, and you might be able to work it where you can do both. When Brock Lesnar did it, he wasn't so much doing it at the same time. He wasn't doing UFC and WWE per se at the same time. He had time off, months off, so he'd be able to train and then get ready and do his UFC. And then when it was ready and it was done with UFC, he was able to come back in WWE. But I see someone like a Gable Steveson maybe being that person that could try pro wrestling and MMA and trying to do something there.
Hey, Jim, the UFC's had 2 big pay-per-views in Jacksonville in the last 12 months. They've also come to Orlando pretty regularly and had some big cards. But it seems like they're a little nervous about putting, some of their superstars down here in South Florida, in the Miami area. Why do you feel the UFC hasn't necessarily invested in putting a major pay-per-view down here ever? Maybe. I don't know if they've ever had it down here, but definitely in a long time.
Long time ago, American Airlines Arena, Matt Hughes.
Oh, wow.
Oh, gosh. I want to, Alex, do you remember this? It was.
I do.
Frank too, and everybody. It was an amazing card, amazing lineup. It drew nothing. It was, and Dana White at the time. Dana White said, "I will never come back to South Florida." And what happened was Dan Lambert and Conan and American Top Team started building that brand. And it became very successful, the training, the coaches, the fighters down here. Then Henry Hooft did his own thing, broke off, and ended up being Hard Knocks 365. It was some Black Zillions there was, and everything. Now we have Sanford MMA with Henry Hooft. That's built up. Great brand, a lot of great coaches and fighters there training. They did come back, but it wasn't a huge show at the BB&T Center, UFC. They also had a fan fest before the show, and outside where fans, whether you had a ticket or not, could go meet the stars. And Dustin Poirier was there, and there were many that were there, and it was a great success. I remember that. Yoel Romero from Miami was headlining that show against Jacare Souza, and Yoel backed out for whatever reason. Dana White, when asked, said he didn't even know. He was just like, he threw his hands up in the air. Yeah, bro, Yoel's not doing it. I don't know what's going on there. They put all their eggs into that, and even no title fight, no Yoel Romero, they still drew a nice crowd at the BB&T Center. And after at the post-fight press conference, I asked Dana White, I said, well, what did you think? You had no title fights. You had no Yoel Romero, but still, what did you think? He said, I'm very happy with this event. We will come back down here to South Florida, and we will have an event here. Whether it be a pay-per-view type, don't know, but we'll have an event. Then what did happen? The COVID hit, the pandemic hit, and it sort of put us back. But Dana White is very respectful for what Dan Lambert and what ATT has built down here, and then what everything else has gone on. MMA Masters Miami, Sanford MMA, ATT. So now Dana White is looking at South Florida. When, who knows, but he doesn't have that stench from that fight way back when, that card way back when anymore. And I think we will be seeing a big event down here in South Florida. Who knows when, but it's not that UFC doesn't want to be here anymore, which is a good thing.
And guys, my take is it's got to be a big event. It's got to be a mega pay-per-view because the South Florida fan, and this is something Dana White apparently has trouble figuring out, is because Dana likes to do this thing where he's testing out new markets, and then his barometer is, if I take a small show there and the small show does really well, then I reward them with a big show. But that doesn't work in South Florida, because if you bring a small show to South Florida, now I know that Jim brought up the most recent event at the BB&T, which was actually a good turnout, so that was the exception to the rule. But for the most part, like I know James and I, years ago, were at that Mighty Mouse Johnson Uncle Creepy fight. Were you there as well, Frank?
All right.
Yeah, I went with you.
That event didn't draw flies, though. Nobody went to that event.
That's when the UFC mailed us huge FedEx envelopes filled with bricks of tickets. Jim,
yes,
to give away. They said, "Hey, we have a handful of tickets to give away. Would you mind if we send you a few?" Thousands of tickets.
But it's crazy because this concept, this is something that the WWE has figured out, and it's something boxing promoters have figured out. If you're gonna bring an event to South Florida, bring your biggest event, because the big events are what get the Instagram models out. Right, all of these entrepreneurs in Miami that are just scamming people, running their Ponzi schemes. They're not going to go to the small shows. The Ponzi schemers only go to the big shows. And what also happens when you put on a big show in Miami, and don't do it in July and August when the snowbirds don't want to be here. You put on a show in Miami in January or in spring or in autumn, and then everybody who live miserable lives up northeast and like in the Midwest and Chicago are going to say, what am I doing here when it's 20 degrees below zero? There's a UFC event in Miami in January. I'm going to go down to that. You're going to draw mega numbers. If you do a big time pay-per-view in winter, autumn, or spring, you're doing big numbers in South Florida. You bring us a fight night show in July, good luck.
But what's weird about South Florida is that you drive less than 200 miles to Orlando, and it's standing room only for the prelims. But something, once you get down into Broward and Dade County, something weird happens with the crowd. Unless it's wrestling, in which case it's pandemonium there.
It's a different crowd in South Florida. We're such a diverse community down here. And it is, like Alex was saying, it's a big – I remember back in the day when was really good football, but still, when they played a smaller team, they couldn't draw well either. And they had great teams. It's just always been the way down here. When the Heat
couldn't draw well as being generous, couldn't draw well as being generous. That'd be like 12 people there for the Syracuse game. Yeah that's right.
It's just the way South Florida is made up, and I always tell any of the promoters, owners that are here, that are coming down here for shows, or their PR people that are getting in touch with us to come down here, I say, listen, hopefully be ready for a good walk-up, because if you have a smaller show, that advanced ticket sale probably is not going to be too good, but don't worry. Keep promoting it, and you're going to hope that walk-up is going to be where you're going to have some fans come to the event and all, if it's not a big-time event.
Well, and Jim, I wanted to ask you, because you would know this a lot better than any of the three of us. The WWE comes down here a lot. Like, how did they do? Do they draw on par crowds down here with other markets, or do they not do as well here?
When they have their TV show, Raw or SmackDown here, they draw very well. When they have they call it the house show. It just means not a TV show. It's just their touring and all like that. They do okay.
Right.
Compared to with the markets and how they compare to, and if they have a pay-per-view here, it does very well. It does very well because, again, to the point that you are making and everyone's making, it's a big time area. It's a big time market area where you have to have a big show. With WWE, when they come down now, AEW is a newer group, and the Khan family is behind this, which owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, which owns FC Fulham in the Premier League. They do analytics for sports. A lot of things the Khan family does. There's a lot of money there. And they started a new company, which is on TNT. So they got TV, which is important. They're going to have two shows now, one on Wednesday and one on Friday night. So they're really stepping up and doing well. They were just here a few weeks ago. They were at the James L. Knight Center. So it's like a 5,000 seat facility, and they drew about 4,000. It was for their TV show. But it was a really good crowd, and for them, it drew well. And that just says that if you have a show and have stars on the show, and you have fans on here that are into it, they'll drive to Miami. I always find this, guys, you can help me with this too. Do you find that people are more receptive driving to Broward and Palm Beach than driving to Miami? Because I've always said that too. I always said that fans, unless it's a big event, a huge event, that fans don't like to drive south, but they will drive north.
You're right about that. And I can say that as virtually save for 2 years of my life that I lived in Broward. The other 34 years I've lived in Dade. I tend to notice that people who live in Broward and Palm Beach, they hate driving into Dade County a lot more than I hate driving into Broward and Palm Beach. I think they're just not used to the traffic. If you have to get on 95 in Dade County, the 836 for freaking get about it. Like your whole night is going to be on that highway. Like I don't know. Like I don't think I mind going north as much as they mind coming south.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, that's why, like, if I don't have rock star seats for a Heat game, I'm not driving down there for that crap. But I'll head out for a hockey game or a football game. That kind of traffic, and that's okay.
Yeah, and let's be honest, the driving gets worse the further south you go. That's how I see it. But
I mean, if you have a family, if it's a family event, a family sporting event, or WWE, or now AEW, or any wrestling that might be coming this way and all, and you're thinking about it and say, well, do I want to take the family drive south, or do I want to watch it on TV or on the internet if they're showing it there too? Because a lot of these bigger companies will also show it, stream it, and also show it, whether it be live or another day. I mean, it's interesting because WWE, their viewership has gone down. They still are the top viewed pro wrestling TV show out there. AEW's catching up a little bit, and they've only been about 2 years old. They're going to be 2 years old in October. So they're still very new, very young. But really, when you look at WWE streaming or WWE social media, I went to YouTube. John Cena, big name. He just came back. He's a movie star now. He's doing the Rock thing. Now he's going to be back for about a month or so. Big event, SummerSlam coming up. He's going to be going to all the different shows WWE has. And then when SummerSlam's over and that big show pay-per-view is over, he'll go back to making movies. So we don't know when he'll come back again. He came back just recently to WWE. Surprise, surprise. It was over 1 million views just for his segment on WWE YouTube of him coming back after it was already on the pay-per-view, which a lot of people saw Money in the Bank. Wow. And they showed it on TV on their Raw show, which also he appeared on the next night on the Raw show. But that one segment of him just coming back at that Money in the Bank was over 1 million views. And it's a lot of segments like that on WWE on their YouTube channel are getting hundreds of thousands of views. So when people are saying, well, people aren't watching, it's like, well, maybe they're not watching like 10, 20 years ago where you had those big monster ratings with 7, 8, 9 share on the ratings for the Attitude Era. But now there's more ways you can watch, and there's more types of ways to watch. You have to factor in all these different numbers too. And WWE just does a great job streaming and with their social media. That's why Peacock spent $1 billion, not a million, but $1 billion to take over WWE's network in the United States, not international. WWE still has its network, WWE Network for the international audience, but just for the US, Peacock spends $1 billion to do that, to stream WWE content. It's amazing what they built.
Alex, 1 million views on a streaming platform. We got to get Cena on our show.
We got to get that. We got to get on Peacock, apparently. And Jim, it's crazy because, like, I think that the next time, like, I'm done with my my DirecTV billing cycle, because I'm locked in. They sweet talked me into agreeing to like a whole year at this what seemed like a ridiculously low price. But it's gotten to the point, Jim, where I'm paying every month for ESPN Plus. I'm paying for Paramount Plus. I'm paying for Disney Plus and for Netflix and for Hulu and for Amazon Prime. Like, we're going to reach a point here, and I'm going to have to add this Peacock as well. We're going to reach a point where I'm going to be paying more just for streaming services than I'm paying for DirecTV or cable. So at some point, I'm going to cut the cord. But it's crazy how many different properties are on all these streaming services. DAZN is another one that I don't currently have, but I might look into for all the boxing and MMA stuff that they have on there.
And that's why, too, a lot of these networks are now merging. A lot of these networks are merging to do the streaming because I think they see the writing on the wall of where TV is going. And it's just going to be a lot of old antenna TV will be on the TV, and all these big cable channels and networks will all be streaming. And that's the way we're going to have to go. We're going to have to stream. We're going to have to sign up for those type of services rather than cable TV. Hey, remember, we had antenna TV, then it turned into cable TV. So everyone's the cable route. And now I think the next phase of the evolution will be the streaming, which is happening now. And it won't be you have both. You're going to want, because how many people have cable TV and antenna TV? It's either one or the other. You had antenna TV or cable TV. I think it's going to maturate into the same process. And we're all going to be doing, like you said, with all the pluses, all the streaming pluses instead of cable. So the pluses will be that, and cable will be the minus.
Well, I think this was a fascinating conversation, and Jim, I hope you don't mind being at least a semi-regular on this program, because especially within the next month when we get these PFL playoff events down here, I want to have you on again soon. He's Jim Varsallone, does an awesome job covering pro wrestling and mixed martial arts for the Miami Herald. Jim, thank you so much, and enjoy your night.
All right, thanks everybody. James, Frank, Alex, I'll talk to you again. Thank you for the invite.
Good stuff,
thanks, Jim.
Man. And it's funny because I wanted to get into some PFL fighters, but we'll have Jim back on again in a couple weeks when we're closer to the playoffs, because I thought that the conversation got really interesting when you get into the business side of promoting. Because I mean, you guys, you see what I'm saying in that for some reason the WWE has figured it out. Boxing promoters have figured it out that if you bring mega events to South Florida, this is somewhere everyone wants to go. People will travel to South Florida the same way people travel to Vegas. I mean, think about it. When fight promoters put on events in Vegas, they're not saying, I wonder how the Vegas locals are going to perceive this fight card. No, they know it's freaking Las Vegas. Everyone's going to travel here. South Florida has that same sort of effect. I don't know why the UFC hasn't figured out if we bring mega events to Miami or, Fort Lauderdale, whatever, BB&T Center or the American Airlines Arena, people will flock to it, but it's got to be a big event.
What's frustrated the UFC to date, though, is the fact that there are weird metrics that contradict the things that have happened more recently. Pay-per-view buys for UFC events have historically been very high in South Florida. There's also, as you and Jim and James were outlining, there's a ton of big MMA gyms here. There always have been. But now this is basically where everyone is, or it's one of the places where everyone is, or at least they cycle down here to train. So, so it's a hotbed of MMA activity. So you'd expect it to be a little like, I don't know, Philly or Chicago or New York, where you could put on a lower tier event and still have a crowd. And when I say lower tier, I mean less stars. And they just can't quite jive the fact that pay-per-view buys are so high. People love the sport down there. But if I headline the card with Mighty Mouse, I got to give all the tickets away. Like, what the hell? So I think it's really frustrated Dana White and the group because, put yourself in Dana White's shoes. You're right, I'm sure. I mean, I've been down here long enough to know that you most likely are. But if you're running the UFC and you have a bunch of busts, do you really want to have a major event here and have the light flashing around to empty seats? I mean, you just don't know. The Miami crowd's not showing up until the co-main. I mean, that's problem number one. That's
a good point. But Vegas is like that too, though.
It can be, but historically they've done it in smaller venues. And, like inside the MGM or whatever. But now in the T-Mobile, they get more of the suburban people in there, and I think they fill it up. But, I mean, down here, I mean, if they do it down there in the – what do they call that heat building? The United Airlines Arena? Do it down there.
It's now FTX Arena.
I'm so behind that.
No, they just changed it like 3 weeks ago.
They go down.
It was never United Airlines Arena, by the way.
No, it was American Airlines Arena.
What was it? Oh, American. I'm sorry. Americans based in Miami. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, they go down there. They're going to be flashing that camera around. Those seats are going to be empty. It's going to be a mess.
And Frank, you're a businessman. You're a smart businessman at that. And one of the most important things that you need to see as a businessman is what? Proof of concept, right? Before you invest in something, you need to have a proof of concept to know that it will work. The UFC simply has no proof of concept that if they send Francis Ngannou, Style Bender, Conor McGregor, whoever you would say their biggest star is that would make for a major event here in South Florida, they just don't have proof of concept that it would work. So it's just too risky a proposition. Right. Now, maybe as you mentioned, Alex, Dana likes to send his B team and his C team to kind of test things out first, but that could backfire as well. So I just don't see, that top 5 pound for pound fighter here. Now, Kamaru Usman, Kobe Covington would have been a perfect fight, in my opinion, here, where you have, two guys that train down here, although Kamaru recently, moved out of Sanford and Black Zillions. But, you have two guys with South Florida ties, whether they train here or live here. Kobe's at MMA Masters, down here, and that's a big fight. But it sounds like they're saving that for MSG. But that I think would be a good test case to where it's not necessarily Conor or Stylebender or Francis Ngannou, but it's a high-level fight to see if that would work. But they're not going to do it.
You got to get Masvidal on a card down here too.
Yeah,
I mean that it would insane the draw that would get.
But as James said, who knows? And they'll just show up for that fight. That'll be the problem.
Yeah,
it'll be an empty arena right up until he comes. That's how this crowd is down here.
Well, they did Masvidal in Jacksonville twice, right? In the last 12 months.
That's right.
Yeah, they did him in Jacksonville. I
knew plenty of people. I knew plenty of people who drove up there from the 305 just to watch Masvidal in Jacksonville. So you don't think they would show up in the 305 or the 954? Of course they would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guys, before in a few minutes, we're going to bring on our next guest, Jonathan Ramlakhan. Before we get to that, I want to talk about the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. This is dangerous time for me, man. It's getting close to dinner time. I'm going to be stuffing my face essentially as soon as the show is over at 7:30. God, I love the fresh seafood at the Quarterdeck. I was down at the Quarterdeck today, in fact, and I built my own poke bowl. The tuna, guys, it's literally right out of the ocean. Like, I cannot imagine a fresher tuna. I got the white rice. I got the ponzu sauce. Throw some seaweed and some leafy greens in there. I felt like I was eating really healthy, and I think I was, and it was really delicious. I love the buffalo shrimp at the Quarterdeck. It is to die for. And Frank, I got to ask you about what you were dining on today, because you were eating this beef sandwich that I have not tried at the Quarterdeck. Believe me, that will be my next menu item there.
Oh my God, Italian beef! I just got it in. Did you hear the chef come out? He was frustrated because it was still it hadn't been broken out yet, and I insisted. I big timed everybody. I said, "You got to just make the sandwich for me." Yeah, it's delicious.
Dude, it looks so good, man.
I want one right now.
Oh, a couple weeks ago, I had the jerk chicken sandwich at the Quarterdeck, which was insanely good. Guys, the cocktails will cure your ails. They are so good. The beer is always ice cold. And the most important thing, my friends, about the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill, I would imagine everybody watching this right now, chances are you're a big-time fight fan. At the Quarterdeck, they offer every UFC pay-per-view fight on the big TVs all over the restaurants for zero cover charge. How good is that? Do not accept when some of these lesser sports bars, these fly-by-night shady spots, try to charge you $20, $30 a head. Do not accept that nonsense. No cover charge at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. You enjoy those ice-cold beers, those great cocktails, that delicious food at the Quarterdeck, and you pay nothing at the door to watch a UFC pay-per-view fight. There are locations all over South Florida. To find the one nearest to you, visit them on the web at quarterdeckrestaurants.com. While you're there, peep that menu. I've gotten into this habit. I didn't used to do this, but over the last couple of years, I love to look at menus online before I go out, and I decide what I'm going to have before I even get there. So if you're like me, you want to do that, check out the Quarterdeck menu, quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. All right, we go out now to our guest line and bring in very good friend of the show, and I hope you're checking out the work this man does all over the 5 Reasons Sports Network and 5 Reasons YouTube with the Three-Piece MMA show. Jonathan Ramlakhan is now with us. Jonathan, lovely to see your face again, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
Doing really well, man. And I enjoyed hopping on with Jonathan for the post-fight after UFC Vegas 32. And I finessed it really well, guys, because I waited for the early fight card, because that one, the main card started at 7. So I wouldn't have to hop on post-fight at like 1 in the morning. We were at 10 p.m. It was absolutely beautiful. I was in bed before midnight. It was fantastic. And, it's something, Jonathan, from the fallout of that main event, I don't think we need to say too much more about the judging. You and I both agreed that Sandhagen probably should have won the fight. He still looked really good. He was given the fight. I want to talk about what's next, okay? Because TJ Dillashaw is penciled in for the next Bantamweight title shot after the winner of the Piotr Jan Aljamain Sterling rematch. Do you think TJ is going to get his belt back? How do you see him matching up with either of those men?
So I'm gonna start with Peter Yan because I do think Peter gets it done. I don't think he matches up supremely well with Peter Yan, right? You look at what he did to Sandhagen, a lot of the clinch work, a lot of the grappling. We saw what Yan did to an expert level grappler in Aljamain Sterling and just throwing him to the floor over and over again, stuffing almost all of his takedowns and not allowing him to stay in the clinch and get close. Peter Yan is one of these guys that has dynamites on his hand. Like for him to put out Aldo, albeit a little bit later in his career, who's naturally, before a 145er, he put him down, and he did the same thing to Uriah Faber. He does the same thing to almost everybody. His power at 135 is pretty extreme. So I think the matchup against Peter Yan would be a pretty tough one because for him to have to get inside, Peter Yan's hands are a lot. It's not like Cory Sandhagen where his punches are kind of like decent. They'll hit you. It's more like volume accumulation. With Peter Yan, he'll put you down with a punch. So I think against Peter Yan, you would have a lot tougher time. But if Aljamain Sterling is able to get it done, I do think that he's going to be able to beat Aljo, right? He has decent ground game. If he gets close, I think the hands are a lot better. I think he just matches up a lot better against Aljo. So if I'm TJ Dillashaw, I'm hoping Aljo gets it done so that way I can get my belt back a lot easier.
Man, the disrespect for TJ Dillashaw, man. Were you not impressed? 2.5 year layoff. I know he suspended 2 years, but he didn't get to fight until July. So 2.5 year layoff, fought through a cut, popped his knee in the first round. Jonathan, because no one else in this panel is giving Dillashaw any respect today. Everyone's saying how it was a robbery and it was everything, but can we give TJ at least a little respect, especially what he got popped for with the EPO? Now he's obviously clean. A lot of fighters mentally can't overcome that, and he came back, took a tough fight, probably his toughest matchup. I think Sandhagen is probably his toughest matchup in the division, even versus Yan as well. But can we give TJ Dillashaw a little bit of respect for what he did last Saturday? Give him a little love at least.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I probably should have prefaced with this. Absolute all respect for TJ Dillashaw coming back. Like you said, after over 2 years, coming back and facing the number one contender, right? If the fight between Yan and Aljo didn't go to a draw, Sandhagen would be fighting for the championship next. So Sandhagen was the one that kind of stepped out, and Dillashaw coming back and taking that guy as a fight. All respect for him to come back to that as well. He performed great. Like you said, after blowing out, it looked like he blew out his knee. In the second round, he was hobbled, but he looks like he forgot about it in the third round. He just fought through it. All respect for him fighting through that as well and taking on a really hard fight in Cory Sandhagen. He looks good, man. He came back and he looks good. It's just, man, the power of Peter Yan is something that's. I mean, they both have power. Don't get me wrong, but man, that dude could hit.
Jonathan, I guess I want to jump on the TJ love fest because I don't want James to be mad at me. But the thing that impressed me about him, we talked to Dean Thomas last week, and he was telling us, Dean likes to talk about the psychology of fighters, and I really enjoy his perspective on that. And one of the things he was saying is when you cheat, it becomes like a bit of armor that you feel like you're wearing. It changes the psychology of how you're approaching it. And when you take it away, you suddenly become aware of a deficiency because you were taking something, presumably, to defend against a self-perceived deficiency. I thought the thing that impressed me most I know TJ's a great fighter. The thing that impressed me the most was he went in there and acted like TJ. He didn't act like TJ minus some secret power that he used to have.
I mean, He looked like it didn't even look like it would have changed his performance that much, right? Because take away his knee potentially getting hurt in that end of the first round, right? He was moving phenomenally that fight. He was able to get to his spots, and he didn't look like, whatever he was on or whatever that was in the substances affected how he fought that much. He came out, and like you said, he fought the same TJ Dillashaw. He was himself. He showed that regardless if he was on it or not, he was able to do it. And like you said, just like with banned substances, it's like when you're undefeated, right? You have that thought of invincibility. It's a little bit of pride or confidence that you have in yourself, and confidence is key. Like you said, the psychology of going into an octagon and being able to stay mentally focused through every second, through every takedown, knowing with all the adrenaline going on, for him to be able to stabilize that situation, stay with himself, and develop a game plan that ultimately got him a win. All respect to him, man. He looked great. I think he's definitely a top 3 guy in the division. I think he's championship material. It's going to be a close fight, but man, all respect to this dude for coming back and looking like he did a couple years ago.
You know, Jonathan, we actually have dueling fight cards this Saturday. You have the UFC in one corner, Bellator in the other. And I know last weekend I said it on this show, and I said it with you in the post-fight. Aside from not having a landmark main event, I thought that this last UFC show, it was pay-per-view quality. It lacked the big name or the big title, right? I look at the upcoming UFC Fight Night card as kind of the opposite. This one just feels like, hey, Dana White is thinking, you know what? We're doing this thing now where we're putting on fights every single weekend, and we've got to throw something out there this coming weekend. So here's what we got. I mean, I don't dislike the main event. It just doesn't feel like a main event between Sean Strickland and Uriah Hall. And then you've got Bellator on Showtime. And the only upsetting thing about this is I hate spending money, and I'm actually going to have to resubscribe to Showtime because I need to make sure that I watch this one this weekend. I mean, they're billing this Bellator. This might be slight hyperbole, but they're billing this as the biggest fight in Bellator history. I mean, it may be top 10, but I mean, you know, you had the Eddie Alvarez, Michael Chandler wars back in the day. You know, I don't know if this is quite. Yeah, so I don't know if this is really the biggest fight in Bellator history, but Patricio Pitbull against AJ McKee. AJ McKee, I love that. He's like a much more dangerous version of his father. I was watching Antonio McKee fight till he was like 45 years old, and he was, you know, very much a lay and pray wrestler. His son AJ is a finisher. This dude is going to kick you in the head. He's going to knock you out with punches. He's going to submit you. I think he's fantastic. And Patricio Pitbull has been at the top of his game for like 10 years now in Bellator. So, I mean, maybe I asked this as a leading question with the way I just talked about this. But, Jonathan, which of these fight cards are you looking forward to more? What do you think is the better card?
Overall, top and down, you have to go with Bellator this time, right? Like you said, Dana White's definitely looking to try to build consistency by having these cards every weekend and taking nothing away from the skills between Sean Strickland and Uriah Hall. These are two guys that potentially could work their way up to fighting Israel Adesanya. So this potentially is a big fight, but what it lacks is star power. There's really not a name there that catches your eye. Unless you're really a diehard and you're looking for that maybe next potential up-and-comer, you're not going to get too much out of this entire card outside of the main event. I mean, Cheyenne Bays as a co-main event, I mean, that kind of speaks for what it is there. No disrespect intended, of course. But I was looking at the Bellator card, man, and top to down, right? I mean, you talked about the main event, right? Of course, you have Patricio Pitbull and then the homegrown AJ McKee, just, 17-0, and he's done it almost all with Bellator. He's grown up in the Bellator system. And what's different from Bellator and UFC is that Bellator will take somebody that's 0-0, and they'll build them up, right? They'll build them up from the ground. They'll get them developed. And then they have the same fighters maybe a couple years later at the top of the division. That's kind of their goal of what they're doing for now, right? Looking at the rest of this card, you have Usman Nurmagomedov, somebody that's training under Khabib, right? You have Islam Mamedov, another guy training under Khabib. This fight is something that I'm sure you love because you love these Dagestani guys.
Oh my God.
Yeah, man.
I would move to Dagestan if not for, the fact that it's Dagestan.
Right. Except for the geographical location. But I think top to bottom, this card looks a lot better. I'm not sure if it's the highest touted bout in Bellator history. Like I said, it's top 10 for sure because you have two homegrown guys, really representing Bellator. This is a true representation of Bellator. It's not like you're putting two ex-UFC guys, so I can see where they're coming from here. But I just think top to bottom, it's a much better card.
Alex, if you head to Dagestan, the State Department's going to have some questions for you. Jonathan, should the UFC be doing fewer events? Because I've been yelling about this for a long time. I know they've got this ESPN deal, but couldn't they tighten it up a little bit? I mean, for example, wouldn't it have been bad to have Uriah Hall fight, last Saturday? Wouldn't be bad to cram a few more fights onto these cards and just give us a little more.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I was listening to you guys talk about WWE and AEW before, so I'm going to actually mention that a little bit. WWE has an event every month, right? AEW has for a year, and those events feel like a lot bigger because they have more of the star power. And, as far as UFC, the thing is with them is they have the amount, the quantity of talent, right? They have the amount of people that they can actually do this every single weekend. So I think from a business perspective, it's good to keep doing it every weekend, because honestly, if there wasn't a Bellator card this weekend, I'd probably still be mostly watching this UFC card. But it's the only thing that they're competing with the bigger Bellator card this weekend that I'm probably gonna, skim over most of it. So I do think that, you want to be able to save these fights. Like, imagine having TJ versus Sandman in a co-main event with, Peter Yan and Aljo as the belt. Like, you could build like massive cards. But I think with what UFC is going for now is really spreading out the wealth, building up a lot of these lower level guys that can start making their names. I mean, look at Costa versus Yanez. These are guys that made their own name and came out and marketed themselves. And UFC is starting to promote that more too, is the guys that are able to market themselves. Hey, we'll throw you guys on a card. So I do understand that you can stack the events a lot more, and I would love that. It's, a lot more exciting to watch a full card of stacked fights. If you look at maybe like UFC 200, how stacked that was top to bottom.
Oh
But,
my God.
And now you have a lot more fighters. The UFC is a lot more popular, and I think from the business perspective, keeping themselves in the forefront of the MMA mind is always going to be key for them.
Jonathan, I want to go back to Bellator for 1 second. Aaron McKee kind of reminds me of Kayla Harrison a bit. Like I think he's good. I think he could do damage in the UFC, but I'm not 100% sure. What's your take on him, and how good is he? How good would he fare in the UFC against, legit top 5, top 10 opponents?
It's tough to say against top 5 and top 10, because the kind of moves that he pull off wouldn't be something you typically see in many UFC fights, right? He does a lot of very, very unique things. And don't get me wrong, it could work, right? It could work for sure. But a lot of times, guys in UFC stuff that, and they're able to work through that kind of stuff. I mean, we even almost saw something crazy with that inverted triangle choke from Sandman, but Dillashaw was able to work out of it as well. So I think the uniqueness might be a factor there. But I still think that he has a little bit of ways to developing his skills before he's able to compete with like the top 5 of that. I mean, the 135, 145, where is he? He's like fighting at 145. At 145, the top 5 in the UFC. I mean, you have Volkanovski, you have Ortega, you have Max Holloway. Man, those 3 guys alone would kill that guy. So
you know who else I'm thinking of when you bring up that topic? Can't we say the same thing about Michael Venom Page as well? Because they are very deliberate with his matchmaking. It's like every time Bellator books him in a fight, it's okay, we're going to put him against a guy he can not only beat but demolish.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing, because I mean, look at the last guy he fought. I think he was a short replacement. I could be wrong, but the knockout that he had on this guy, I don't think he knocked him out cold. I think he just broke his nose, but he put him down with a beautiful head kick. And like you said, it's the matchmaking that's a little bit suspect, right? They're putting up against, I don't want to say trash cans, but sometimes they're trash cans, right? There's sometimes these guys that are just out there, almost like what UFC wanted to do with Moutinho and Sean O'Malley, right? Just build his record up and let him get that spectacular knockout. So I do think there's a little bit of suspect as far as the quality of talent that he's fighting. I do think the skills are there, but as far as transitioning that game to the UFC, I think he has a little bit of time before he's able to do that.
Well, let's look at this main event in Bellator in a vacuum, because I do love this matchup. I mean, Patricio Pitbull has been fighting at such a high level for such a long time. He's a great champion. I love the fact, by the way, that he was willing to enter that Grand Prix when he didn't have to, because Bellator gave him the option of, you're the champion, you can just sit out and wait for a winner to emerge and then defend your belt against whoever comes out on top. He said, no, I want to enter the Grand Prix. And he's, demolished all 3 opponents he's faced in the Grand Prix so far. This is going to be his toughest matchup, definitely against AJ McKee. So how do you see it playing out? Because honestly, Jonathan, selfishly, I would prefer to see AJ McKee win this fight to put the strap around some new blood, because I've seen what Pitbull can do for the last decade. He's an excellent fighter, but he's probably peaked. To me, McKee could be, at least in Bellator, the next big thing, and I'd like to see him get that strap.
I'm right there with you. As far as sentimental value, I definitely want AJ McKee to get it. I think it's time for a guy like that to take the next step, kind of take the torch from Patricio Pitbull. But as far as the matchup goes, I almost dropped the mic there. Before the matchup goes,
Mic drop.
yeah, mic drop, literally. I think such a supremely close fight. I mean, we know that Pitbull, he has that crazy guillotine. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he got his last opponent out with the first round guillotine as well. He has that ability to fight late, take the fight, into deep waters, 4th, 5th rounds. But he also has that ability to finish you early. And as far as McKee goes, he's another guy that's well-rounded, but he does it in a little bit more of a unique way, right? His submissions are kind of very all over the place. They're not traditional style submissions. And as far as the striking goes, it's a little bit more free-flowing rather than, Pitbull's kind of get in your face, load up for that shot kind of style. So I think it's a really good matchup. I think Pitbull is kind of on the back end of his career. I think he's coming off of, he's already past his prime a little bit. Don't get me wrong. Dude's a monster, right? It's such a tough fight to pick. It's such a tough fight to pick because both of these guys are just so well-rounded. It's almost like Colby versus Usman because, they're neutralizing each other. I'm going to say McKee takes it, man. I think his confidence is there. He's undefeated, and he's going to come out. Youngblood gets it done. I'm going to go ahead and I'll take it.
Last thing I want to ask you, Jonathan Ramlakhan is with us. So Stipe Miocic has been speaking out because the ONE FC CEO put out this social media post, who should we sign next? And then you see Stipe complaining. And on the one hand, he kind of has a point.
Get out of here.
I'm saying kind of. When he feels like he should be, getting another title rematch and he's getting passed over. The thing is, I also think the UFC is doing the actual champion Francis Ngannou dirty because they're making an interim title because they don't want to wait an extra month for this guy. You know what's happening with Stipe, Jonathan, and I think it's very appropriate that he's Instagram commenting on ONE FC because Stipe, he's starting to remind me a lot of, a much heavier, of course, version of Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, right? Because it got to a point with Mighty Mouse where, Mighty Mouse was the most dominant flyweight champion ever, the same way Stipe technically is the most dominant heavyweight champion ever if you go by title defenses and all that stuff. But it got to the point where promotionally, the UFC just decided with Mighty Mouse, and I think they're deciding it with Stipe as well, this guy can only take us so far. He's just not moving the needle, right? Because I find Stipe to be incredibly boring. Right. I mean, about as boring as a longtime heavyweight champion could be. And he doesn't necessarily.
Everyone does.
And he doesn't
Modelo. They canceled those commercials.
That's right. So do you kind of see that happening here, Jonathan, where promotionally, it seems like the UFC is phasing him out and they're probably relieved he's not the heavyweight champion anymore.
I can definitely see it. I mean, Ngannou is a spectacle compared to Stipe Miocic. And if you look at this guy, as far as his media goes, Stipe Miocic is one of the most regular dudes out there. And that's not a diss to him in any type of way, but he's just a regular guy. He works his job as a fireman. He'll go and fight some UFC fights, win some championships, and call it a day. And as far as moving the needle, I don't think he moves the needle anymore. I do think he's the greatest heavyweight of all time as far as accomplishments goes. But I think they did there's some layers as far as the heavyweight thing, right? You could have maybe put him in the interim title fight because the rubber match is there, right? He beat Ngannou one.
That's true.
You have Ngannou win the second fight. Really, he deserves that rubber match because, he's the greatest of all time. He won 2 in a row against, he won 2 in a row against DC because he lost the first one, won the second 2. He is kind of deserving for it. So I can see the point where you're making there. And obviously doing Ngannou very dirty, having that interim title fight in the first place. But I can see that this being a situation where the UFC wants to do this. But now think about when it happens last time. They got back Ben Askren, right? And Ben Askren became the star that actually built Masvidal's star. So I'm not sure if that's something you want to do. Do you want to take that risk of giving up somebody like that and, maybe getting somebody back that's not the same quality? I'm not sure as far as that, but I do think it's a blessing in disguise for the UFC because Francis Ngannou compared to Stipe Miocic, one guy is a global spectacle, one guy is a normal dude.
Jonathan, you nailed it. The fight that Stipe should be in is he should be fighting Lewis or Ciryl Gane. That's the fight he should be in. You got to win one, right? When you get knocked out that badly, you got to win one to get back. So that's the one he should be upset about because it's the number one contender fight. It's not an interim title. Yeah.
Well, they say it's an interim title because they feel like they have to put a belt on the poster, right? It's this thing where it's like, they think their fans are stupid. Like they think their fans are like, hey, if we put a belt on the poster, everyone's going to buy it because it's a title fight. Like, bro, it's not a title fight. But huge thank you as always to Jonathan Ramlakhan. Let the people know,
Wait,
man.
wait, Alex, before you do that, Jonathan, I gotta let you know, I'm available for these post-fight shows, but just be advised, I'm heavily liquored up when it happens. So
Yeah,
man,
you should get Frank on this week, because I might be going to bed at 11 this Saturday. Frank is up till like 3 a.m. anyway. Get Frank on this week.
It'll
Frank,
be what's that?
Oh, go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just gonna keep talking about how much I drink. That was it.
I was gonna say my show's not sponsored yet. So you can come, you can drink, and you can be as wild as you want to. That's not a problem with me. So hey, if Donno doesn't make it this Saturday, you're invited. And James, if Frank doesn't make it, I know you're a busy guy, but you're invited as well. But I want to thank all three of you guys. Always a pleasure for having me on as well. Special thanks to Donno, of course, shouting me out. Appreciate it. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Three-Piece Combo. The 3 is spelled out. And of course, catch us right here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. We're here with Walkouts and Knockouts, and we also have the Three-Piece Combo MMA show. So Donno, I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you guys.
Good stuff, man. Excellent stuff there by Jonathan Ramlakhan. Guys, something I want to get into before we wrap up the show. Conor McGregor, is the guy having a nervous breakdown? Has he just reached a point where he realizes he's starting to lose his grasp of being the biggest draw in combat sports? That you have another loss to Dustin Poirier. He realizes, if I can't start winning fights again, because he hasn't won in seemingly forever, I need to just start saying crazier and crazier and crazier things so I can stay in the news cycle. I thought he went a step too far. Let's take a look at this tweet that Conor McGregor wrote, among other things, but I thought this was the far more offensive thing that Conor wrote. So Khabib Nurmagomedov had tweeted out months ago that, a message to Dustin Poirier before Poirier fought McGregor, that, you're going to win because good always prevails over evil. And then Conor McGregor, I think this was early this morning, in a since deleted tweet, writes, "COVID good and father is evil." So the background on this guy, as I'm sure you two know, Khabib Nurmagomedov's father last year passed away from complications of COVID-19. And then you have Conor McGregor taking what is a very obvious classless shot at Khabib, who once said good always prevails over evil. And you have Conor tweeting out, "COVID is good and father is evil." Like, bro, he did delete the tweet. I wonder if this is one of those things like John Jones, where he sent it out knowing he would delete it, or if he honestly thought, oh, this is a great thing to have on my timeline. And then Dana White called him like in a sweat, like, hey, you got to take that down. You got to take that down. But it's like, guys, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Something I've always respected about Conor McGregor, because the guy has taken L's before. He's taken high-profile losses before in the octagon and in the boxing ring. And historically, he had always been a really graceful loser. And he didn't melt down and lose his mind after losses the way that Ronda Rousey used to. And it's why Ronda just didn't, she wasn't in the right mental state to keep fighting. She had to leave the sport. Conor McGregor has always handled losses well. But James, after this loss, we see Conor melting down and taking no prisoners.
Yeah, and Alex, I saw it was very subtle, but I noticed something after the pay-per-view when he lost to Poirier, and he was sitting down on his butt, with his legs stretched out. It was broken, and he was saying things to Joe Rogan, to Dustin Poirier, that this isn't over. I don't care if it's in the parking lot. And there was no reaction from the crowd. The crowd was walking out, leaving, barely listening to him. It was, half empty arena at that point. No one really paid attention to Conor and what he was saying, really, for the first time. And he kept saying more ridiculous things, started talking about his wife and all these other things. And there was really no reaction from the crowd. Like, it was almost like everybody kind of tuned him out. And I wonder if Conor noticed that really for the first time, no one really reacted to what he was saying, even though he was getting more and more ridiculous and kind of upping the ante with his comments. And it seems like he's starting to do that even now on social media to kind of get a rise where I think the general public now is starting to kind of lose respect, starting to tune him out a little bit, probably for the first time in his athletic career where, as he was going up, more and more people were tuning in to what he had to say. And he was clever, and he had, things to say that weren't offensive, but was trash talking. It was clever. Now it's just downright offensive, and it's not clever, and it's dirty almost. A lot of the things that he's saying. And I think a lot of people are tuning him out to that. And he's struggling with that. He's just never really had that. and on top of the rehab and all the stuff that he knows is a long road ahead. So it's not. I mean, I just don't see it as a positive what's going on with him right now, at least from the limited view that we can see. And hopefully, he kind of someone in his camp talks to him. I think that's probably a problem too. No one in his camp kind of tells him, what to do or what's the difference between right and wrong when he's wrong. And I think we're kind of seeing the product of all those things going on at once.
Look, you're exactly right. He's barely hanging on to a top 10 position in the UFC's lightweight division. I mean, it's over, and his outlandish comments are just indicative of a man, trying to hold on to the edge, and it's just slipping away. But who needs to talk sense into him? His business manager. I mean, this guy is a marketing machine. He has a post-career. I mean, what he did with that horrible whiskey was breathtaking considering how it tastes.
I've heard it's terrible. I never tried it, but it's been described to me as paint thinner.
Yeah, terrible's not a strong enough word. And he sold $600 million. And he did it. And listen, I have a lot of respect for what he did. He did it because he traveled all over the world promoting it. I mean, he did that. I mean, that was effort based on personality and fame. And that will continue for him. And his business manager needs to let him know that just because you can't maybe win a mixed martial arts fight against a top 5 guy anymore doesn't mean you're not still a star. It doesn't mean you can't still make huge amounts of money in other business ventures. But you say stupid things like he said on Twitter, and you hijack that potential. I mean, these big companies, they're terrified of the pitchfork social media crowd.
Oh, my God.
So, you say enough stupid things and you're out. Look at John Jones. I mean, John Jones is walking out with full Nike sponsorship. He's the next Roy Jones Jr. in terms of Nike's endorsement of fighting. And all of a sudden it's gone because you say a couple or do a couple stupid things and they're gone. So Conor's just at the precipice of screwing everything up. Forget fighting. I mean, fighting is something that's going to go away because you're going to get to an age when it goes away and the sport catches up to you. But all the things that he could do post-fight career, he's about to screw all that up too. So I hope his business manager grabs him by the short hairs and lets him know we've got hundreds of millions of dollars left to make here. So just shut up.
If Dana White has any balls, this is how I punish Conor McGregor. I make him fight Islam Makhachev next. That should be the punishment.
He won't take, and his business manager should tell him, don't take that fight. In fact, he should not be thinking about fighting anyone right now. He should be thinking about resurrecting his image, congratulating Poirier, making a donation to Poirier's charity, and just getting back on track in terms of all of the other things that he has going on in his life professionally that can make him a lot of money.
And good Conor didn't last very long, did he? The Conor from the Cowboy fight, the Poirier fight, that lasted about 12 months. And then, the bad Conor came back, and it's been worse than the previous Conor. So hopefully he gets his act together. But yeah, good point, Frank. He does need to focus on rehabilitating his image after this, because I'm sure he's lost a lot of fans based on, all the stuff that he said and continues to say.
I think another thing
but
that really
more important than losing fans, he's scaring away major corporations. That's the thing that freaks me out for him.
and I want to bring in nobody on this show is as passionate being anti-McGregor as Manny Chang, our producer. Manny, are you laying in bed? Oh, it looked like you were laying in bed for a second, but I see you have like one of those gaming chairs. That's actually not a bad setup there.
Yeah, I do. No, my only thing was, I think it's time for Conor, instead of trying to be the badass MFer, trying to just create talk. We know, and we have already seen this. He needs to turn the table and just become that guy. I think that James just kind of said, give respect to who you lose to, and just become that hardworking fighter again. And I think the true Conor fans that were once, screaming his name and who cares, I'll follow you, I'm not even Irish, but I'll have an Irish flag. They will come back if they see his effort has now become, instead of me trash talking, you know what, I've had broken legs or whatever, I'm going to work my ass off to just, I'll shut the hell up and I'm going to do everything that I could that my body and soul can do for this sport going forward. Enough with the antics of, oh, mother, I'm going to do this. That doesn't work anymore because, one, he's not winning, and two, he can't be sitting on the mat and telling his opponent, in reality, which he lost to, oh, your wife is DMing me. Like that, at some point, like enough is enough with those little antics, right? So
he needs to join our BMF division.
for
Yeah.
sure. Well,
he needs to
does.
join the show. I will personally help him rehabilitate his image right here.
Yeah, so then
We get
that was my
Cena
only
and
point.
McGregor on. We get Cena and McGregor on. I mean, the sky's the limit for us.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, like that tweet. Come on, man. COVID is still a sensitive subject everywhere around the world.
Especially sensitive to the guy who lost his father to it.
Especially to the guy that's sensitive and lost a father to it, right? And then you go ahead and you tweet it, then you delete it. It just makes you look like an ass even more. So that's my take. The only way I feel like Conor can kind of resurrect himself, besides his bad whiskey, which I do agree with Frank, was absolutely horrible. I don't even drink, and I thought it tastes like piss water. Whatever the case was, he needs to just become that guy. You know what? It's quite clear that the way that I used to be when I was winning, I'm not winning, and I can't be the same type of person. I need to just bust my ass, work my ass off, and just show everybody, you know what? I am who I am, per se, and just create a different narrative, because the same thing over and over again. It's making him look like an absolute clown.
If there's one thing I've learned on today's show, it's that we're not getting a sponsorship from Proper Number 12 Whiskey anytime soon, with the way that we've talked about their brand for the last 10 minutes. And I was working a Proper Number 12. Oh, all right, sorry guys, but I want to send a huge shout out to everyone who tuned in, whether you're listening live, watching live, or you're listening back to this on replay or watching it on YouTube. Thank you so much. And for those watching it on YouTube, do us a favor and smash that like button and subscribe to this YouTube channel, 5 Reasons Sports. And you should already be subscribing, because whether you're a Miami Heat fan, a Miami Dolphins fan, a Hurricanes fan, a fight fan, Olympic basketball fan, we got something for everybody in the sports realm here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And make sure you subscribe to our audio podcast as well for 5 rounds. Huge shout out to James Walker. Huge shout out to Frank Zaffere. Oh, and follow everything on Twitter, by the way. Fight Reasons is the handle for all of our combat sports content, whether it be Frank's favorite pro wrestling or MMA and boxing. The hub for that is at Fight Reasons on Twitter. Huge shout out to Manny Chang running the show. Huge shout out to James Walker, Frank Zaffere. Thanks to Jim Varsallone for joining us and Jonathan Ramlakhan for joining us. And if you missed any part of the show, catch the replays on YouTube and on the podcast channel. I am Alex Donno. Make sure you follow all 3 of us on Twitter. You see the handles there. We will talk to you again next week. We'll be back to Thursday next week. I'm a diva, so we moved the schedule around for me this week. We'll be back to Thursday night. We'll talk to you guys next time on another episode of 5 Rounds, served by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Make sure you check them out, quarterdeckrestaurants.com. We will talk to you guys next time here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.